Welcome to the Calisthenics show. Simon Atta, also known on social media as Simonster Strength, actually, right?
Yeah, that's right.
How did you come up with the name?
I didn't come up with the name. That was that sort of just stuck with some friends and was passed on. So I had a friend who was training with some guys from Japan. They had come to Australia to visit, and the guy from Japan was talking about me, or I think maybe the other way around. Someone was referring to me, and he said, "Simon, you know Simon," and the other guy was like, "What? I don't know who you're talking about." He's like, man, the guy, he does all the strength moves and the power moves. He's like, "I don't know who Simon is." And he said, "Come on, Simon, he's a monster." And the guy went, "Oh, Simonster." And then that name that name kind of stuck. So that's how that came to be. I wish I could take credit for it, but I don't think it was really something that was very well thought out by anyone. I think it was just kind of off the top of their head at one moment.
It has got stuck with millions of people that have seen your videos and seen you on the internet, and I'm grateful to have you on the show because you have inspired me since I started calisthenics. Actually, the crazy things. I remember your first video I saw, and that was the kick up to handstand, and
Thanks.
you have been a huge inspiration since then. And I've been watching your videos, always get inspired whatever you post.
It's great to hear.
So I think I'm not the only one. And that's why you are here on the show, the Calisthenics show. We will talk more about you. I will ask some questions. So I think it's just time to jump into the first question. That is a basic question. How old are you and where are you from?
I'm 30. I'm about to turn 31 next month, and I'm from Melbourne, Australia.
Melbourne. I have never been there. I want to visit. I wanted to visit many countries in 2020, but we know what happened.
Yeah, me too.
Tell me a bit about Australia, Melbourne. How is it to live there?
Yeah, Australia's a great place. I love it. The people here are very laid back. It's quite a diverse culture. Lots of people from lots of different backgrounds. Yeah, overall, I love it here. If you like food and coffee, Melbourne's a great place to be. There's a big coffee culture. But the one downside of Melbourne is the weather. The weather's very unpredictable. For about 6 months of the year, it's very gloomy and often rains. But you get a few months of good weather in summer, hopefully.
I know this park, this calisthenic park, that is pretty famous in Australia. But where is it in Melbourne?
There are a few calisthenics parks now, but I think the most famous one has always been the bars at Bondi Beach. Those are in Sydney. But Melbourne has a calisthenics park that's pretty recent in Elwood Beach. It's got blue floor, really nice park. You'll see a lot of videos from guys there, especially more recent videos. I think it's a better park, if I'm honest.
Okay. I need to see it. How tall are you and what is your weight?
I'm 179 centimeters, so about between 5'10 and 5'11. And I don't know my exact weight right now, but I think it's around 77 kilos. I think the heaviest I ever ran is about 80 kilos.
Wow, you're 179. I thought you were like 170.
Yeah, I get that quite often.
Like I'm 183. My weight is like 83
You're
kilos.
quite tall.
Yeah, I'm tall. So you can imagine for me, it feels like some calisthenics stuff feels like impossible sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not an excuse.
Exactly. You can't change your height.
No, you can't.
You just have to work with what you're given.
I read a bit about you on the internet. I got some information, and you have a pretty long training history. So I would love to know the training history of yours. Like, how did you start, and what did you start with, and how did all of that lead to the things that are today?
Yeah, so I started with gymnastics when I think even before that. My dad used to be able to walk on his hands, and I thought that was really cool when I was about 8 years old. So I started trying to learn how to walk on my hands. Then my parents got me enrolled in gymnastics, and I did that for about a year. And at the same facility where they taught gymnastics, there was breakdancing classes. I tried out a breakdancing class. I enjoyed breakdancing much more, and I stopped gymnastics and I went straight to breakdancing. As I progressed with breakdancing, as I got older, trying some pretty hard moves, and I always thought if I was just a little bit stronger, I'd be able to do this move. If my technique has a slight imperfection. I could probably save this move if I just had a little bit more strength. And I'd been exposed to calisthenics or bodyweight strength training through gymnastics. And I started doing some of these exercises to help my breakdancing, you know, things like planche exercises, press to handstand exercises, handstand push-up exercises. That helped a lot with breakdancing. I really enjoyed it. But my main goal was always breakdancing. As I got a little bit older, I started doing some weights as well. As I got older, you know, 18, 19, I'd had experience with circus, with some hand balancing, with some tricking. I did martial arts for a few years. I really liked the freedom of being able to do whatever I wanted with my training. I didn't like being stuck under a very structured sport. That's what took me to breakdancing from gymnastics. When you train at breakdancing facilities, you often see flips, you see people who do power moves, you see people who do tricks. And I always gravitated to those impressive skills. So I like to learn some flips, some tricks, some power moves, some strength stuff. So that's how I developed the skill set I got. And then as I got older, I studied physiotherapy. I started getting a few injuries. That's when I moved to doing more and more calisthenics and becoming more and more interested in the science behind calisthenics and strength training. So now mostly what I do is teach calisthenics. I really enjoy that. But that's my long history of doing a bit of everything.
You sound like a free spirit. Like I do what I'm gonna do or learn whatever I want. I'm not like you said, you don't want to be stuck to one thing. I think many people that have that mindset also improves a lot when they have fun on the way when they're working out.
I think there's a lot to be said about choosing a style of training that you enjoy. So calisthenics isn't for everybody. If you hate calisthenics and you don't get any pleasure out of doing it, you're probably not going to go to training with the same sort of motivation and approach it with the same intensity that you would if you found something that you enjoyed. I really encourage people to just find a style of exercise or an art form or a hobby that they enjoy. That's going to make it so much easier to progress with it, especially when it comes to exercise, which can either be really fun or really miserable. So if you can find something that you enjoy doing, that's very, very conducive to progress.
How long have you been doing breakdance?
I do very little now, but I started when I was about 11, so 19 years.
19 years. That's insane. Sticking with something for so long. I heard that you took the Australian National Breakdancing Championship. You won, if I'm not wrong.
Yep.
And also you have performed on different stages and events. Tell me a bit about the performance. What performance have you done? Where have you been seen? What have you been doing?
Yeah, so I've done a bit of everything when it comes to performing. I've done a lot of sporting events within Australia. I've done some, big day parties. I've done things in Bali. I've performed in Las Vegas, but I've done just about anything and everything from, really small events to local bar mitzvahs and birthday parties and weddings to, big sporting events like the national, football match and basketball matches and a bit of everything.
When you perform, what type of, are you doing breakdance or is it like more like the mix of calisthenics or breakdance?
It's almost always breakdancing. So I usually do some calisthenics in my performances when I'm performing, but the main thing that you'll see is breakdancing, and that's usually with a group. So there's a lot of choreographed routines in there. There's some solos in there as well, but it's really a choreographed performance that's just designed to be entertaining.
You've been doing breakdance for such a long time. What is your, not secret, I don't like the word, but how have you been consistent with it for such a long period?
I think I've been quite lucky because I've had a really good environment to train with. I think that's probably the biggest thing that's helped me stay consistent for so long. So I've had a lot of friends who've been doing it for about as long as me. We've trained together during this time. I've traveled a lot and trained with other people who I've looked up to for a really long time, and that's been quite motivating. And I think with the internet, it's become very easy to stay in touch with people. So, I often see videos of people that I've trained with in France and in Germany and in Japan, and that's really motivating. Yeah. So I think just having an environment that kind of pushes you to stay consistent and to train is really helpful. If you go to the gym, it's very hard to not work out, and that's what it's like with breakdancing. If you go to a breakdancing training session and you have a bunch of friends and people there training, it's very hard to slack off. So that's mostly what I've been doing. What's kept me going.
If you approach somebody that doesn't know what calisthenic is, how do you explain calisthenic for that person?
Yeah, I usually say calisthenics is body weight training. So using exercises that use your body weight, things like push-ups, chin-ups, dips, those are all example of calisthenics exercises, but it can go a lot further than that. And then I'll usually show them a video of somebody doing a planche or handstand push-up or a front lever.
What is your favorite skill?
I would say handstand push-up variations. Yeah, so things like handstand push-ups, 90-degree push-ups, even planche push-ups.
So besides working out, do you have any other passion that we don't know about?
I don't have anything that's really, unique. I think it's all the same things that most people like. I really like traveling. I like hiking. I like food. I like coffee, spending time with friends. I like reading and thinking about meaningful questions. I like philosophy. I play some chess when I'm bored. Nothing that I'm really consumed by like calisthenics.
When did you get recognized on social media? When did you feel like, wow, I'm really growing, I'm really getting known on social media?
So 2014, a friend and myself made a video of me basically training and doing calisthenics and breakdancing at a martial arts gym. So it was in a cage or in a boxing ring. I think that's the video where you see the planche clap behind the back. We put that on YouTube, not really expecting much of a response. We didn't expect a great number of people to see it. That took off. It got seen by over 1 million people in a couple of weeks. That was really what kickstarted that the following on social media and on the internet.
Cool. Like from a small project, actually building something this big and also getting recognized. You never know. You never know what can break through with the internet.
Yeah, exactly.
You have a big social media following from different pages. And does social media put a lot of pressure on you?
Not really. I think what does put a lot of pressure on me is trying to answer questions that I get on social media. So I get a lot of questions about the programs that I have. Hey, Simon, what's the difference between, this program and that program? Can you tell me a little bit more about it? I feel a lot of pressure to reply to that and to emails, but otherwise I don't feel any pressure. It's social media. People just won't be exposed to any new content if I don't post anything. I don't see anything really bad happening.
You're a bit older than most of the people that I've been interviewing, and some feel that they have this image they need to show all the time, put the best content, do the best and do it often and so on. And I'm trying to openly talk about it because I don't think it's healthy in the end. Yeah,
I totally agree. I think putting a lot of pressure on yourself can be quite unhealthy, especially if you're obsessing over it. And I think it's best to acknowledge that you're human and you don't have to post amazing things on social media every single day.
Who had been your inspiration during your training period? Like all from breakdance to calisthenic, or maybe another athlete or person. Who has been your inspiration? Did you have different ones? Did you have one?
Yeah, so I think some of these guys might not be known to a lot of your followers, but I think my main inspirations have always been in breakdancing. So I always really liked power movers, people who are doing really impressive spins and tricks that I thought seemed impossible. Chico, Pierre Blériot from France, also known as Punisher, and his brother Demon. Pocket from from Korea. He's amazing. He's sort of the best of the best when it comes to power moves. All of those guys really inspired me. But as I got older, calisthenics now, there's 1,000 people on social media you can follow who do amazing things. So it's very hard to pin that down to one particular person. I don't think there's been one particular calisthenics athlete who I've gained the most inspiration from. I think it's been divided among a lot of athletes. But one thing that I've really liked, especially as I've been teaching more and more, some of the people who teach about exercise science. Greg Knuckles is someone who's really inspired me. I really like the information he puts out. I really like his clarity of thought and his way of explaining concepts. So that's something that I've tried to apply to calisthenics. He's a power lifter. Aspire to do the same sort of thing in the calisthenics world.
What do you do for a living?
Yeah, so I do a few things for a living. So the past few years, I was performing in Las Vegas for a show. I also work in Australia as a physiotherapist. I do some one-on-one coaching, but not so much anymore. I have training programs that I make and I sell online.
I think I've seen the commercials. I don't know, everywhere.
Yeah.
The Join Fit app, right?
Yeah. I get them too. So I don't own that app. It's an app platform that I have a program on, like a musician putting music on Spotify. So yeah, I have a calisthenics program on there, but that app has, rock climbing. It has other athletes that have different programs.
For those who are listening and watching this, can you explain a bit more what a power moves is?
The way I generally explain power moves are spinning breakdancing moves. So they're moves like head spins, air flares, windmills, those sorts of things where you see people spinning around in a circle without their legs touching the ground.
I would love to learn flares one day. I think that's one breakdance move I want to learn is flares.
I'll have to make a tutorial for you.
3 best tips for people who are starting with calisthenics.
Number 1 tip I would say is, once again, back to that point of finding something that you enjoy. So take small steps, build a habit firstly. I think that's the most important thing, building a habit of training. And a really good way to do that is by training with friends, training somewhere that you enjoy, doing something that you feel is sustainable. Another tip that I would give to beginners is just focus on a few things at a time. There's so many different skills in calisthenics. You might start and think, I want to learn planche, front lever, back lever, human flag, handstand push-up, one-arm handstand. It's very difficult to make progress when you're trying to chase 30 different skills at one time. A much better way to do this is to just pick 1 or 2 skills, focus on those for a period of time, maybe 6 to 8 weeks, make progress with those particular exercises, get repeated exposure to the same exercises so you can progress with them. And then when you've got that move to a decent level and you're happy with it, then focus on something else. If you take the analogy of trying to catch, if somebody throws 30 balls to you at once and you try to catch them all, you're going to drop all of them. But if they throw 1 or 2 at a time, you can probably catch them. Think about it that way when it comes to mastering skills with calisthenics. And then a lot of people often ask when I say that, well, after I master a move, won't I lose it if I don't practice it? A lot of these skills will help each other. If you mastered a handstand push-up and you spend the next 6 weeks training planche, that will help your handstand push-up. But with that being said, it takes a lot more effort to learn a skill than to maintain a skill. So you might have to train it 3 times a week to accumulate it. But then once you've mastered it, you only have to train it once a week or once every 2 weeks. While you're training these other skills, you can just try the skill that you're already competent with, just to make sure that it's still there and that the movement patterns are still crisp and it's still familiar. The final thing I would say, make sure you listen to your body. Don't push into pain. You often hear these very motivating sayings online, like no pain, no gain. Some people take those a little bit too literally and they train into pain and they think, I need things to hurt. But training shouldn't be painful. You should feel effort, but you should not feel pain. So if you are getting pain with your exercises, modify them so they're pain-free, or stop and see a professional.
I couldn't agree more, because I've had that, I've listened to these motivational speeches, work hard, train hard, blood, sweat and tears, and no pain, no gain. And when you get older, you learn also, you get smarter. I've had golf elbow in both elbows right now. Now I have in this, I'm healing. I've done PRP for this, actually. It got really good with the other one. But it's like you said, train smart. Don't do it with pain.
A lot of people think, if I miss this training session, I won't progress as quickly. And that might be true. But if you train into pain and you injure yourself and you get golfer's elbow, that might stop you from doing that exercise for 3 months or 6 months. And what's better, 1 or 2 missed training sessions or 6 months of missed training sessions?
Okay, what's your tip for anybody that want to learn power moves like air flares, flares, and all the breakdance stuff? How should they approach that type of training?
Training power moves is like learning any other skill. It's like learning how to balance on one hand or how to learn a handstand. It's not the same as developing strength. It's not the same as improving your bench press or improving your your push-up capacity. With these skills, you don't really want to fatigue yourself. You want frequent repetition of exercises at the edge of your ability that apply to the skill. These should be broken up by rest so that you can train optimal state each time you practice these exercises, not like strength where you're trying to fatigue yourself. So if it comes to take the example of learning a head spin, if you want to learn how to spin on your head, you learn how to stand on your head first. You start by moving your hands around and rotating yourself in an eighth of a circle. When you become proficient with this, you've practiced that, you get better at it, you might try and push a bit further, so you're rotating a quarter of a circle each time. As you get proficient with that, you do half a circle, full circle, until you can tap and spin on your head. Once you learn how to do that, you still need to be challenging yourself to make progress. So you might tap until you have speed, try and spin without your hands for a few seconds, and then tap again to gain momentum. So with these skills, very technical, they're very complicated. There's lots of different moving parts. Luckily, we live in a day and age where you can find a tutorial for just about anything on YouTube. So you can check out tutorials to learn windmills, flares, air flares, etc.
What's your best tips for those who want to learn static skills? How should they approach that type of training, according to you?
The best way to improve at that skill is to practice that skill. So I hear a lot of people say things like, you don't need to practice statics, you'll get these free if you practice dynamics. While that's true, you will get some transfer over to statics. The best way to improve something is to practice that thing. One of the most important principles when it comes to strength training is that of specificity. If you want to get good at bench press, the best thing to do is train your bench press. It's not to train tricep extensions and flies. They work the same muscles, but you will get much more progress training that specific skill. So when it comes to learning statics, once again, you want to choose a level that is challenging but achievable. Train at that intensity and do statics. With that being said, training dynamic exercises in addition to that is very beneficial because this will help you train through range, gain more muscle mass of those particular muscles that you'll be using in your statics, and also get practice of a similar skill. So it will add a bit of volume, it will help you gain more muscle mass, and it will help your statics. But to improve statics, you need to be doing statics.
It's so much information out there. Like, people have so different approach. And one thing I see is that young people that have no idea how the body works at all give advice and spread things that are not truly how the body works. They're like, oh yeah, you just do, you have no you just try, and you will learn. Instead of having, like you said, a method, you can do dynamic exercises, and then you work on the specific ones.
And there is a lot of misinformation out there. What I can say is just find somebody that you trust that justifies why they teach the way they do. And actually, just saying just try is not the most harmful thing that you see on the internet. you see a lot more advice that is a lot more dangerous. But for a lot of people, just trying the skill over and over again will lead to progress. But a lot of people need a much more intelligent approach with that. And just trying will only work to a certain period of time. Here's my tips about statics. So to improve a skill or to improve a strength movement, there are two things that you care about. One is neuromuscular efficiency. So that's how well you can activate the particular muscle fibers that you want to activate and inhibit the ones that aren't useful. The other is muscular size. So there are many things that that determine how strong a person is. For example, how far your tendon inserts from the joint will influence how much torque it produces. But you can't change that without a surgeon. The only two things you can change through training are neuromuscular efficiency, how well you can recruit your muscle fibers, and how big your muscle fibers are. So those are the two things that you want to target. When it comes to neuromuscular efficiency, specific training is very important. If you want to get good at a 1 rep max, you need to be doing high intensity work. If you want to get good at endurance, you need to be doing endurance. If you're just doing sets of 10, your 1 rep max might improve, but it won't improve as much as if you throw in some higher intensity work. On the flip side of that, if you just do high intensity work, if you just do 1 rep maxes forever, you're not going to build much muscle mass. It's a very difficult way to accumulate enough volume to build muscle mass. That's why bodybuilders don't train with 1 rep maxes. So for strength, you see a lot of athletes periodize their training where they do blocks of hypertrophy for 8 weeks, blocks of strength for 8 weeks, and try to peak for an event. When it comes to calisthenics, we're rarely trying to peak for an event. We just want year-round training for a lot of people. So a really good way to do a year-round strength training program and get the best of both worlds is to do the majority of your training moderate to high intensity. You might do reps of 5 to 10. You might do holds of 15 seconds, or you can just double the reps. So you might do holds of 10 to 20. That's usually an equivalent of time under tension with reps of doing 5 to 10 if each rep takes 2 seconds. That's a really good way to build muscle mass and address the hypertrophy component. But if you want to get good at holding a planche for 3 seconds or 5 seconds, you should be doing some high intensity training in there as well to train that specific skill of holding a planche for 3 to 5 seconds. So what I would do is do your general training program, isometric holds of 15 seconds, do your dynamic reps of 5 to 10 for planche raises, negatives, lever raises, lever pull-ups, those sorts of things. And then once or twice a week when you're fresh, do a couple of attempts of 3-second planche holds. So find the most difficult planche you can hold for 3 seconds or 5 seconds. And you might do 2 sets of that. That's not going to fatigue you for your workout. All the exercises after that should be of a similar performance. But then you also get the specific practice of the high intensity work.
Now that you talk about this, is this how you approach your workout programs that you're selling?
Yeah, so in any programs that I produce, there's generally a combination of high intensity work and moderate intensity work. So here's a good and this applies to both statics and dynamic exercises. So that applies to the planche. But then if you want to look at something like the one-arm chin-up, if you just do 2-arm chin-ups all day, it will help your one-arm chin-up. It will help, but it won't help as much as doing specific one-arm work. But if you just do one-arm work, you're going to get golfer's elbow really quickly. So what I would recommend is you do some one-arm work. You do some specific one-arm work. You might do pulley assisted one-arm chin-ups, or you might do one-arm chin-up negatives. And then you might finish off with some work to build some muscle mass. It won't be as specific, but it will help accumulate muscle in the relevant muscles to the one-arm chin-up. So you might do weighted chin-ups, weighted pull-ups. You might do some front lever work, and that's going to go a long way with helping your one-arm chin-up ability. Whereas if you just did one-arm chin-ups, or you just did weighted chin-ups, it's not going to help, or it's not going to be optimal. It's a good way to either not get specific strength gains or to get injured. I see a lot of people online giving advice. I often think it's trying to be unique. You don't need to do statics, just do dynamics. You never do statics. There's no point. And I often think, why? There is a very good reason to do statics. It's not going to take away from your dynamics. It's not dangerous. If you want to learn statics, do statics. And often these strength training principles are quite simple, and the best way to get good at something is often quite simple. You don't need all these technical fancy techniques that can often be a huge waste of time.
Do it consistently for a longer time period. Rest. That's it.
Yeah, that's very sound advice. A lot of people overvalue things that might have a very minute impact on their training. So they might think, I read something online about I need to have protein directly after my workout in this anabolic window. They focus on that so much more than their training, when really training is the most important stimulus when it comes to building muscle and gaining strength.
So I have a question about statics for you, because you have an insane knowledge and also the strength. Many people is like, you should not, the technique to when you do an exercise is the most important thing to focus on. If you don't do the technique fully perfect, you should not even try.
Yeah, let me push back against that. So people say, I've heard this a lot. You need to do everything with perfect technique. You need to be holding your planche with perfect protraction. If you don't have protraction, there's no point doing it. I think that is bullshit. And the reason for this is if you focus on protraction and that's your most important thing, you might never progress. You start doing tuck planche, you might be able to do that with good protraction. You move to advanced tuck, your protraction's no good. Tuck's too easy, but your protraction's no good in your advanced tuck. So what do? You just keep doing tuck forever. I would expect a lot more progress if this person does advanced tuck with suboptimal technique. As long as the technique is not dangerous, I would prefer that person to do the advanced tuck and build capacity doing this as they work towards the full planche. They might get the full planche with, retracted shoulders, but they can hold a full planche. The other person's still stuck on tuck. And it's very easy if you can hold a full planche to do some scapular protraction work and address that component. You don't learn any skill with perfect technique in this. If you look at people learning skills, you look at a toddler learn how to run or walk, you look at a child learn how to throw a ball, they do it with perfect technique. This is something that is refined over time. They do it with okay technique, and then over time their technique becomes more and more proficient and they get better and better at it. It's the same thing with calisthenics. As long as your technique is not dangerous and it somewhat resembles your skill, it's okay to train with imperfect technique, as long as you have the intention of good technique. Take handstands, for example. If you tell somebody does handstands have two components. They have a alignment component where you try to do a straight line, and they have a balance component. If you never practice balancing because you're always worried about your line, my line isn't perfect, you will never be able to balance on your hands. But the person who practices balancing with a banana back handstand, they get better at balancing and they also address their alignment so they might do 10 reps of learning how to balance, and then they might do some wall handstands where they're really focusing on the alignment. They will have a much easier time integrating that alignment into their balance. Whereas the other person is just stopping themselves from setting a low ceiling for where they can progress to.
I can relate to this a lot, because when I started calisthenics and I didn't have social media, I didn't have people commenting or whatever. When I did a handstand, first of all, I had the banana. It was the shittiest form you could ever see, like in every beginner. I just kicked up, I balanced, and I stand on my hands. But I learned how to build some strength, and I could stand on my hands for 30 seconds with bad form, and then I corrected. Okay, now I want to improve. I need to work on my mobility, and so on. And I think I've lost this approach a bit to planche and statics. I think many people also lose this approach, because so many people are pushing to this, you need to have perfect, you can't move on if you don't have that perfect. And I all the things you say with this, then you get stuck with the progression or stuck with that one thing. I can so relate to that.
I think you should set some things that you need to achieve in your skill, but it does not need to be perfect. So for example, with a handstand push-up, if you set the goal of your straight arms at the top, you touch your nose to the floor at the bottom, straight arms at the top. If your back arches a bit, it's okay. Just have the intention of doing it with good form. You'll still make progress. If you have to do it perfectly, you will never actually practice a handstand push-up. You will never get exposure to that specific motor pattern, and you will slow your progress down. If I took this approach with the front lever, so take the front lever, for example. If you set some standards for your skill, for example, you should have straight arms in your front lever hold. I think that's a good one that most people can achieve very easily. But if you set a ridiculous standard, like you need to have full retraction in your front lever hold, very rarely do people have full retraction in a front lever hold. If I had this approach that I need to have a full retraction in every practice session I do, I would never have done a full front lever. I would still be stuck on tuck. Very rarely do people have full retraction in their front lever. It's very hard to achieve. but the intention should be there.
I like this. I like this. And I think many people benefit from hearing this as well. And this is something that should be pushed more. I know Fitness FAQ does a lot of good videos. I like his channel about calisthenic and also the right approach. I really like his stuff.
Yeah, Daniel's really good. Yeah, he's a friend of mine, and I stand behind basically everything he says. I really like his advice. That's advice you can trust.
You have been training for a long time. What are some key things you have learned on the way when it comes to your training, and maybe that you could share with those listening, like an approach that you changed or something that you thought from the beginning and not now?
Yeah, so I think one thing that has changed a lot since I started, this has changed a lot in the exercise community as well, is that you don't have to go to failure, especially as you become more and more advanced. So traditionally, people have taken every set to failure. You do bench press, you go to failure every time. You do chin-ups, you go to failure every time. But when it comes to learning more technical skills like handstand push-ups, the quality of your sets is very important as well, because you need to develop the technique as well as developing the strength. For more advanced athletes trying to develop these sorts of skills, I think it's very useful to stop shy of failure. So to give you a concrete example of this, with that being said, you probably need to go close to failure to make adaptations. Like if you took your bicep curl that you could do 10 times and only did sets of 2, it's not going to help very much. You probably don't need to go all the way to failure. So you might be able to stop at 8. So here's a good concrete example. If you've ever done handstand push-ups, do you know how many handstand push-ups you can do?
Me, 4.
So if you do 4, if you do 4, you go to absolute failure. How many do you think you get on the next set?
Like maybe 1.
Okay, maybe 1. Perfect. So let's say you do 4 sets. You do 4, then you do 1, then you do 1, then you do 1. So you've done 7 handstand push-ups total. If you had stopped shy of failure and instead you do sets of 2, you do 2, you do 2, you do 2, you do 2, it's not as fatiguing. You've done 8 sets, 8 reps over 4 sets. So you've done more total volume. In addition to that, your repetitions, if you watch them, are going to be much cleaner than if you went to failure. So you're going to be balancing better. Your technique is going to be better. You'll develop that. You'll practice the balance. You'll practice the motor pattern at a much higher quality than if you went to failure. But it's still challenging. You're still stimulating your body to adapt, but you've accumulated more volume. And this becomes more apparent over more sets. When it comes to learning skills like the handstand push-up, I would much prefer to stop shy of failure and do 10 sets. You might do 10 sets of 1 or 10 sets of 2, as opposed to doing 4, 1, and then 1. So I think staying shy of failure is something that can be used intelligently, especially with advanced athletes. That is something that my mind has changed about over the years. I think as a beginner, I always try to take every single set to failure, and that's something that's definitely changed my mind about. Now, with that being said, I'm not against failure. I still do take a lot of my training to failure, but with the most important exercises, with highly technical exercises, I like to save 1 or 2 reps in the tank. When it comes to isolation exercises at the end of my workout, I do take those to failure.
How do your workouts look nowadays?
I usually start with skill practice when I'm fresh. So I might do 30 minutes of handstand training or hand balancing or power moves to start with after a warm-up. And then I usually start with my most complex exercises. So things like handstand push-ups, planche raises, planche negatives. So I generally train, maybe 5 days a week. I do a combination of skill training and strength training. So skill training always comes first when I'm fresh. I might do 30 minutes of hand balancing, 30 minutes of power move training before my strength training. I will do usually 4 or 5 exercises in my strength training, starting with the most complex exercises and those that are most related to my goals. So I might start with planche raises and planche holds and finish off with things like pseudo planche push-ups or wall handstand push-ups, because they're less technical, less of a balance component, and they're not as related to my goals. I really like using a push-pull leg split. So I might do push Monday, pull Tuesday, legs Wednesday, and repeat that process.
Have you had any injuries
The hundreds. I've had shoulder reconstruction on my left shoulder. I had a labral tear from a jiu-jitsu injury, a knee scopes, meniscectomies on both knees from jiu-jitsu injuries, ruptured my adductor longus tendon. I tore that off the bone. I've had rotator cuff tears. I've had golfer's elbow. I've had ganglions in my wrist, you name it.
And you're still going strong.
Yeah.
Okay, now we know you have had a lot of injury, but tell me, what was the worst one?
Shoulder reconstruction. This was the most painful experience. I was in a sling for 6 weeks. I couldn't move my arm. When I got out of the sling, I couldn't lift my arm. I had to build strength just to be able to lift my arm again.
That should have like really mentally pushed you.
Yeah, it did.
I can't even imagine. So a basic question now: how long can you hold a full planche?
I haven't tried for maybe a year. I've had a rotator cuff tear that I've been managing, so I haven't trained any planche holds for over a year. I'm not sure about my full planche hold. At one point, I could hold a straddle for 30 or 45 seconds. I could probably hold planche for 5 to 10. Yeah, not very long.
This is a question I actually got a lot of, and that is, how important is it to work on your flexibility and mobility in calisthenics to progress or to get better at calisthenics?
Flexibility is important for a few skills in calisthenics. So if you think about your straddle flexibility, the wider you can split your legs, the easier it will be to unlock the straddle planche or hold the straddle planche, unlock the straddle lever, and learn press to handstand. The better your overhead mobility is. If you're limited to here, you can't do a straight line handstand. This is a planche. Yeah. Or you do a banana back. You need to be up here. Overhead mobility is very important for a straight line handstand. Back shoulder extension mobility, hands behind your back, is very important for a back lever. So that mobility is important for a few different skills in calisthenics. Beyond those skills that require mobility to do, it's probably not very useful to have more flexibility. Most of the skills in calisthenics don't require a great deal of flexibility. So I think if you're training flexibility with the goal of calisthenics, it should be purposeful. You should have a reason for including those stretches.
If you want to work on V-sit, mana.
Exactly. So if you want to work on V-sit, you need to have good pike flexibility, good hamstring flexibility. You also need to have good shoulder extension flexibility. But if you want to just work the planche, if all you care about is the planche, you don't require any flexibility. Everybody can put their arms here. When it comes to planche to handstand, that's when you need to worry about your overhead mobility. If you don't have good overhead mobility, you can't do a straight line handstand. The stretches that I always include are shoulder extension, very important for back lever. Overhead stretches, very important for handstands. If you want to have a clean handstand push-up or planche raise, you need to have a good handstand. And I include straddle and pike flexibility because it's related to straddle planche, press to handstand, V-sit, mana, those sorts of things. But beyond that, I don't include very many stretches.
And I think I agree with you. If you don't have specific goals for calisthenics that you want to learn, you don't need to focus on that so much.
Exactly. Yeah, you might want to include some stretches just to maintain your mobility. You don't need to pay a great deal of attention to it.
How important is it to set goals when you're starting working out and also when you progress further along?
Yeah, I think goals are really important. You should have what you call SMART goals. Those are goals that are specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're realistic, and can be done in a timely manner. So what SMART goals mean is having a goal that you know that you've achieved. If you set a goal like I want to be able to run faster, it's very hard to measure that. And to know when you've actually achieved that goal. Whereas if you have a clear, concrete goal in mind, I want to be able to run 100 meters in this many seconds, you can really work towards that. So I see a lot of value in long-term goals. They keep you on the path where you're trying to go, but also in short-term goals, because short-term goals are very important to keep you progressing and to keep you motivated. And having small victories is very encouraging in your training. So it's a very good way to keep you motivated and keep you on track. So for example, if you have the goal of being able to hold a planche, that might be years for people to achieve the planche. But that's the long-term goal. If you know what you're aiming towards, it's important to have some short-term goals along the way so that you know that you're progressing, you're on track to there, and you have small victories to aim for. If you're always going for the planche, you're going to spend, if all you care about is full planche, you're going to spend the next 2 years just thinking, still can't do it, still can't do it. Will I ever do it? But if you have short-term goals to aim towards, I want to hold the tuck planche for 20 seconds. Great, tick that off. Awesome work. Now I want to hold advanced tuck for 15 seconds. Awesome. Straddle planche for 15 seconds. Awesome, I can do it. Full planche with a band for 10 seconds. Full planche with a lighter band for 10 seconds. Unassisted full planche for 3 seconds. Unassisted full planche for 5 seconds. That's a really good way to ensure that you're working towards the goal and to keep you motivated along the way.
So we have the last question for this interview that I ask everybody. And the last question is your favorite quote.
Oh man, I can't think of a quote that comes to mind, but a quote that I just read a couple of days ago that's quite relevant to what we've been talking about is one by James Clear, the book Atomic Habits, and has a lot of really good advice. Formation. The quote I read the other day is, the more disciplined your environment is, the less disciplined you need to be. Don't swim upstream. And I think that has a lot of utility when it comes to improving calisthenics. So if you can find a way to make your environment more conducive to getting work done, go a really long way. So if you make yourself accountable, if you have a friend that you train with every Monday, there is a lot more of a price to pay if you don't show up, because your friend gets upset with you, than if you're just training on your own every Monday. So those sorts of things can go a long way.
It's like you said in the beginning of this interview, like you think that your progress also is the environment that you put yourself into, with the people working out, the people you met, and so on. This has been a really awesome interview and interesting approach, both like a lot of tips, and I think those listening or watching are appreciating this a lot. And you have been a really requested guest on the show, so I just want to say really thank you for doing this and being here.
Thanks for having me, and I hope it's something that your listeners find valuable.
Okay, man, I just want to say thank you before we close this interview. Thank you again, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. Might see you in the future someday when we all can travel. I
hope so. All right, take care. Thanks for having me.
Take care.